Get in the know. Non-stop Vikings talk. It's Purple Daily on Score North and ScoreNorth.com. Purple Daily, presented by Surly Brewing Company.
We had some interior penetration on the play, and Dalvin was actually going to attempt to throw that football to Johnny Munt, and he was open in the back. We just wanted to make sure, number one, that there was no penetration there, and ultimately trying to be aggressive in that moment. Goal line defense in there, not a lot of runs from the 3-yard line, and we had the play set up and just didn't execute, and the ball went the other way. It was a critical error. We got to go back and look at it, and I'm always going to rely on our guys to make that play and execute in that moment, but ultimately a huge play in the game.
Yeah, no, that I wouldn't rely on the backup center to hold off interior pressure with a trick play in a crucial moment of a road division game. It's just I've never coached a game of football in my life, but I'm just going to sit here on a Monday and armchair coach that one for you, KOC.
This is not an armchair observation, but anything that you're going to do that's going to be trickery or creative needs to involve heavily, preferably with the football in his hands, a guy who wears 18.
Or even like a jet sweeping motion involving 18, just something.
But I mean,
something.
The play that Jefferson made last week, where he went to pass, and look, he could have thrown the ball, but he clearly, in his mind, saw nothing and showed zero panic, and basically surveyed the field, took off, and got a first down. Okay, like this is like having the third best athlete in your grade school class run the recess trickery football play. Like the bell's about to ring, the score is tied, and you have like the third best guy. You have Joey run a play.
Yeah, it's Declan running the crazy trick play
exactly.
at the end around. Doesn't make any sense.
We had a kid named Rich Rolfs at St. Therese who I always relied on because he was just our best athlete.
Okay, I feel like you've butchered the analogy here. Dalvin Cook is one of their best athletes.
But Justin Jefferson's better.
Okay.
And he never
I just
panicked.
feel like you're slandering Dalvin. Dalvin Cook definitely
I am.
screwed up.
Cook. Dalvin Cook runs the football really well. Dalvin Cook being asked to do that play, he has not thrown a pass.
I know. I don't disagree with you. I just feel like you comparing Dalvin Cook to like the idiot, unathletic kid on the playground is a step too far.
No, I've done this for years. You've got your best players who know how to do certain things. Everyone fits into a category. But anyway, Justin Jefferson, if you're going to get creative, KOC, and it doesn't involve 18, go back to your desk, sit down, and think about what you're about to do.
As you can tell, we are still fired up after the third Vikings loss of the season yesterday. We're going to do our usual Monday autopsy. We'll give you our hottest Vikings takes. We'll give you a pie chart, which I've been up all night cooking and slicing for you, a pie chart of blame. And we will give you some silver linings to make it a balanced show as well. But this is Purple Daily, daily Vikings entertainment and therapy as needed. We just want the Vikings to win a Super Bowl before we die here. We reject 500 football. We want championships at some point, okay? And the show is presented by our friends at TCL. No matter what you watch, TCL has award-winning TVs for any budget, any space, all with stunning picture quality. And TCL makes more than just TVs. They offer mobile products, audio devices, home appliances, a great potential holiday gift for someone in your family or friend circle. TCL brings you joy and simplicity through innovative technology. You could also pick up a little 6-pack of Tall Boys or something, of Surly, for a stocking stuffer, or just for yourself to cope with what we saw on Sunday.
Exactly right. After that game, pick up as much as you possibly can. The only question is which ones. Furious, Before I Die. Let's get back to work on that next week. Logic Bomb, Controlled Chaos. Look, here's the thing. The Surly roster up and down is so deep and has so many star players that we have a problem deciding each weekend on which one we're going to drink. But you know what? It's still fun to make that decision. Surly Brewing, proud sponsor of PD. We appreciate them. And I know that all of you who show us your cans appreciate them as well. Check it out.
All right, dudes. Let's do it here. Go around the room. All three of us are going to give our hottest Vikings take as we've sat here for the last, 18 hours or so and have digested this game. So, Judd, you're on the tee box here. The driver is in your hands. Send it, baby. What is your hottest Vikings take on this Monday?
I've given this great thought, and it's not going to surprise you, but I've thought about how I can frame this to make it as hot and yet realistic as possible. And here it is. Today, when he walks in the building, Ed Donatel, defensive coordinator of these Vikings, needs to be stripped of play calling. You could say fired. I don't see it happening, though. I don't think it's realistic. I'll be shocked if Ed Donatel by the end of today or this week has been relieved of his duties. I'll be absolutely floored. So that would be a take, but I don't think it's going to happen. Stripping him of his play calling, realistic as hell. And look, this was not a one-game blip. This was a culmination of ineptitude. So if this had been one game, Harrison Smith didn't play, okay, unfortunate, embarrassing, get back to work. But when you have given up, as the Fox graphics showed yesterday, 400 plus total yards in 5 consecutive games to set a single season franchise record, something is not working. You are 10-3. You have a chance at something special here. This is not, this is not an okay year in which, okay, we'll go back and reevaluate, which you will have to do. You need to put players, as KOC said, and what I thought was probably his most stern and direct comments yet as a coach. Yeah. You need to put your players in a position to succeed. I don't care what your system is. I don't care what your scheme is. I don't care fundamentally how much you believe in that. Right now, it's time to make the players shine. Not saying you can't go to a 4-3. You can't, you can't change the scheme right now. It's too late. But what you can do is you can sit down and find a way to get the best from your players. Danielle Hunter has been basically absent for 3 of the last 4 games. And the other thing is, what you can do is in-game play calling wise, as O'Connell said, be a lot more aggressive. I mean, yesterday again, they weren't aggressive. They don't blitz, and then they're soft in coverage. It drives me crazy. I'm stripping him of play calling. Okay, he's out as my play caller, and if that causes him to pull a Norv Turner and quit, okay, I'll cross that bridge. But I'm stripping him of his play calling, and I'm doing it today. I'm O'Connell, and we'll adjust from there.
Some data to chew on here, and we can. I am wondering if any of us will go further than that by the end of the show. And I have an example here, which may or may not be relevant. But as we wake up here this morning on this Monday, the Vikings defense is last in the NFL in pass yards per game given up, last in the NFL in passing yards per attempt given up. Yep. The only reason why they also aren't last in opposing team passer rating is because they have snagged 12 interceptions, which is 6th in the NFL so far this year. So they get credit. They definitely get credit, but you're not always going to be able to rely on interceptions because the opposing quarterback can dictate whether he throws a risky pass. And sometimes you're not going to get the ball that's bad at the line of scrimmage, right? That falls in the arms of a linebacker or a safety. So there definitely is skill involved in interceptions. And we've talked about that with Patrick Peterson, film study, etc. But it's not a predictable, reliable thing that you can say, this is why we have a top defense. The yardage needs to also fall in line. I will also note, after yesterday, I don't have the data for yesterday's game yet, hopefully by the end of the show. The Vikings have a bottom 5 blitz rate. So again, how are you last in the NFL in passing yards, yards per attempt? You are an atrocious pass defense, not even to speak of the run defense. And you aren't trying something more aggressive. Well, but if we're more aggressive, we're going to get burned. You already get burned all the time. Yeah, it makes no sense.
The stats yesterday, according to ESPN stats and information people, extra pressure was sent on 9 of 41 dropbacks. 2 of them created pressure.
So his point would be, well, I mean, see, when we do it, we don't get pressure that often. To which I would say, well, I would find a way to do it and to get pressure.
Right. And that's what I said is unless you believe that Danielle Hunter is just cooked and he still gets some sacks, but he is unless you think he is just a shell of the player that we saw through 2020 or 2019, how are you not getting him home more? How are you not creating more pressure? He has 7 sacks, but in the last 3 games, he has 1 sack. Yeah. So that's my question is you have to find a way. And O'Connell basically said this because he tries to do this offensively. You need to find a way to feature your best players. You can't be this. I'm telling you guys, this goes back to, I remember covering this 2006 with Childress and his whole thing of he did not do anything that featured players. It featured what he believed to be the principles of his scheme. And that's when he said, well, when it's executed right, this is a kick-ass offense. Okay, that's great. But aren't you going to try and find a way to best showcase your players?
Yeah, I mean, on the offensive side, you brought this up on Vetline yesterday. Kevin O'Connell's all about collaboration, Kwesi and the collaborators, right? We were kind of poking fun back in January.
Yep.
And how many times has Kevin O'Connell talked about him and Kirk getting together, either in person or via text or whatever it is? What does Kirk feel comfortable? We're not going to run anything offensively that Kirk doesn't feel like he can handle. Now, as a coach, are you going to try and like push some schematic things on him and get him to feel comfortable? Yes, because you need to expand his boundaries a little bit in this new system, and they have. Have they done that on defense? Have they gone to Danielle Hunter, Zadarius Smith, Harrison Smith, who's playing much fewer snaps on the line of scrimmage than he was in Mike Zimmer's system, and saying, all right, guys, so I've got my philosophies for how this 3-4 thing can work. How can we also mold it to what you guys feel comfortable doing? You've all played together, especially like Danielle and Harrison. Patrick Peterson's been here for a couple of years. So I don't know that those same conversations are taking place. All right, Declan, what is your hottest Vikings take?
All right, my hottest take is Kevin O'Connell was the biggest reason the Vikings lost to the Lions.
Okay, wow, okay.
I'm putting this all on the head coach. From the idea to throw a jump pass with your running back to your backup tight end, play calling on short to go situations. Now, we have plenty of examples that Kevin O'Connell does not know what to do, and for whatever reason gets way too cute and wants to go pass heavy on short to go situations. Once again, on another 4th down, you had another chance to just probably punch this in, and you're in shotgun on 4th and 1. What are we doing here? Your offensive line is banged up, and you continue to establish the run. The Vikings running game, on 34% of their rushing attempts the last 5 games, is averaging 0 or negative yards. That is the most in the NFL by a wide margin.
That's right.
Now, I personally am not going to get too upset over the 2-point conversion call, but again, I think we're getting a little bit too ahead of our skis, and we're thinking of one play ahead here. Even decision to go for the onside kick. I get that the defense has been gashed, but let's say you didn't convert the onside kick, so now the team is essentially past midfield. Best case scenario is you stop them, and they're either going to kick a field goal or pin you back on your own goal line. I actually rather would take my chances that you kick off to them, get a stop, force a punt, even get a turnover, and you're in a better position to score. I think this loss goes 100% on coaching. And if he continues to employ Ed Donatel, who is a guy who has allowed a defense to surrender 400-plus yards over the last 5 games, and you're 10-3 right now, and that's the biggest issue. I'm not talking about a kicker that's missing kicks. Your defense is your biggest issue right now. That falls on a head coach. That falls on Kevin O'Connell. So Kevin O'Connell is the biggest reason, in my opinion, that the Vikings lost to the Lions.
Oh, you guys coming out swinging today. I like this. And I'll even add, you kind of touched on it there, but doesn't any criticism of Ed Donatel and the scheme on defense have to also fall under, or maybe even primarily, Kevin O'Connell? And I think you can say, this is where there's room for nuance. There's room for gray area. I think it's possible to say, I love Kevin O'Connell personally. Yep. I think that guy is a home run hire. He's a first-year coach, still trying to figure some things out. So on one hand, I love Kevin O'Connell. Compartmentalizing that, there's a lot of room for criticism what they're trying to do defensively. And ultimately, he's the one that greenlit the hiring of Ed Donatel. Mm-hmm. And it's now December, and they have to have a come-to-Jesus meeting. I'd love to be a fly on the wall for that meeting, the coaches' defensive meeting today on this Monday, and what they're talking about. But we used to rip Mike Zimmer all the time for like, well, why doesn't he? Why is the offense so archaic? Why this? Ultimately, he is a head coach of a football team. He needs to make sure this offense is more modernized and more explosive. Well, it's the same thing on the other side of the ball, and they are using a more modernized defensive scheme. But it just feels very rigid, and they just have not adjusted in the last few weeks to some obvious evidence that this thing is broken.
Hiring a guy who knows the guy who is a huge part of this scheme does not assure success. Like O'Connell knows McVay, but he has also shown offensively. I'm not going to say he's great, but he's pretty good. But Donatel was, I mean, he is the definition of a journeyman coach. he's not it's not like he was part of this 3-4 innovation. He coached and coordinated 4-3s until he met Fangio. I think in retrospect now, probably the mistake was not beating the Eagles to the punch, right? And getting Fangio as a consultant, at least. Like it would be.
What was the connection there? Is there just dumb question? Is there a Howie Roseman? Like, is there a?
There was a connection between Fangio so he was DC of the Bears. He got hired as the coach of the Broncos. Donatel was then brought in as his DC, which meant that
no. I mean between Eagles and Fangio.
Oh, I have no idea what that is. Yeah, they probably just called him up and said, "Dude, your defenses are great. Let's at least consult." It's probably a great way to make about what, $250,000 or something like that, and show up occasionally.
I don't know what the consulting rate is, but yeah.
But anyway, that would be. It would sure be nice to have a guy like Fangio throughout the course of what's gone wrong this season to lean back on at least and say, "Hey, why don't you come here, pop the hood, and take a look at what's wrong?"
Yeah. Well, I'm going to say something that I kind of thought. I thought this going into the game just because of what Vegas was saying. It's like, wow, maybe we should take a step back and just be as objective as possible here. But I'm going to let the game play out before I say it. And my statement is, or I guess my hottest take is, yesterday's game was not a fluke. The Lions are better than the Vikings.
Whoa.
And I'm going to bring you evidence. Whoa. I think a lot of people think, well, I mean, it's just, the Vikings, if they would have done this. On the season, the Lions have a better point differential than the Vikings. They were favored in the game by 2.5 points, according to smart odds makers. They have a more explosive offense statistically. It's not even really close. They average like an extra explosive play or two per game, and you saw it yesterday. They have a better offensive line. Both defenses are kind of a wash. It's in terms of yards per play, it's the 31st and 32nd ranked defenses, so both defenses are kind of a sieve. Yep. And if you go back to the first meeting, so the Lions won the game decisively yesterday. Yeah, the Vikings came back and made it kind of a backdoor situation, but that was a 2-touchdown game late in the fourth quarter. In the first game, the Lions were up 10 points in the fourth quarter. So the Lions have had double-digit leads on the Vikings in both fourth quarters of their meetings this season. I don't know what you can really point to at this point to say that, at best, it's an even draw between these two teams. And I'm going to spoil something. I may put my rankings where my mouth is tomorrow in the pigskin pecking order. I'm just going to throw that out there.
Oh, wow.
The Lions are a better team than the Vikings. They've also won 5 of their last 6 games. The one loss was just a bad coaching move by Dan Campbell past the 50-yard line against the Buffalo Bills on Thanksgiving.
Right.
I know it's crazy to hear, and it sucks to hear that, Vikings fans, but an objective look in the mirror and a survey of anyone else that follows the NFL after yesterday would say, yeah, the Lions got off to a weird start. They lost a bunch of close games, but they're better than the Vikings.
Do you know what I really like about them? Their depth at receiver is absolutely outstanding. And they're starting to prove that you can, it's, I think, like a bullpen in baseball. They're starting to prove that you can never have enough guys.
Yeah.
Young talent filtering in, right? Look at the options Goff had yesterday. Actually, it was incredible.
Glad you brought his name up. So I think, again, we sit here in our little Vikings world and people just in the Kirk or blank debate, which you could do 20 times over. People laugh when you bring up like Jared Goff. Would you rather have Kirk or Goff? It's a laughable question. I mean, Kirk was outstanding yesterday. So was Jared Goff. So yesterday, I'll take the Kirk performance 10 out of 10. But if you look at the last 6 years, so let's take Jared Goff's rookie season out of the equation when he was with Jeff Fisher and the Rams were a total train wreck. All right. He was about to be fired. So rookie quarterback thrown into the fire. Let's take those 7 games out. They were a train wreck. Last 6 years, yards per attempt, nearly identical, Goff and Kirk Cousins. Yards per game, nearly identical, 259 to 257. Their QBR the last 6 seasons, nearly identical, 54 and 55.9. The difference is, when given a great car to drive, Goff drove it to a 13-3 record and 1 score away from a Super Bowl championship in 2018. So I want to open some eyes here. The Vikings look in the mirror today. Jared Goff, a little better than everyone gave credit to. When you give him a decent car and some infrastructure, he can drive it. And the Lions today have a worse record, but are a better team than the Minnesota Vikings on December 12th, 2022.
That is a hot take. I have to digest that. Like,
They
I get all the
just smoked
facts.
the Vikings yesterday.
I know, but I still have to digest that. It's the Lions. I love their young talent though, offensively, because yes, you're right. The defenses in this case are a train wreck wash. But you know what I think this does show? I think this does show when you have an opportunity, because I think the Vikings are going to regret this, and you can laugh all you want. When you have an opportunity to draft a receiver who looks like he's got potential in 2022, I think you take it. I don't think you get cute. I don't think you trade back. I think that you take that guy. I'll tell you flat out one thing that's getting frustrating. And I've been on this train. I'm a man on an island a little bit, but it's been frustrating. The loyalty factor here to certain players is we're going to have to get past it. Adam Thielen is your second guy. Look, he still has a place on this team, okay? In the red zone, he's very good. He has great hands. He will till the day he dies. He's got God-given ability to catch a football. But when you have no ability to create separation, and I will go out on a limb and say you literally struggle to move. Like if it's close in space, but I mean, if he catches a ball and there's not a lot of space there, he goes backwards to try to get going fast to come back at you.
It happened again yesterday.
Yeah. So like Thielen, great hands. I'm not trying to say he doesn't have a place here, but at the price tag that they're going to now and are now paying him, and when you look at what Detroit incorporates and you think, what if Justin Jefferson had one or two guys on the depth chart right below him who are like this? Imagine the explosive nature potentially of an offense, which I think we all can agree for the Vikings is not firing on the cylinders it should be. The question is the why. And I think part of that is you are not employing beyond Jefferson receivers who are real threats.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the next level to this Vikings offense may not exist until you have the Vikings. They showed a graphic on the Fox broadcast yesterday. They ranked 28th in the NFL in explosive plays, which are 20-yard plays or more. And they actually had a couple big ones to Jefferson yesterday. They actually had like 4 explosive plays yesterday.
Yes.
And that's how Kirk also got to that 425-yard mark. You're not going to get there by just completing 11-yard passes all day. But largely this season, that's the way they have to score. It's 11-play, 70-yard drives, which you got Hawkinson for 9, Thielen for 8, maybe Jefferson for 15, 4 runs into the back of the line of scrimmage, right? Like it's a bunch of jabs, and they are precision jabbers for the most part this year, which is a big reason why they've been able to rack up these wins. But that home run element, it does matter because you're going to make mistakes. You're going to turn the ball over sometimes. To be able to have a quick strike or two in a game, the Lions have it. They absolutely have it. Would I trust Jared Goff to exclusively put together 11-play drives? No. But if he's going to hit Jameson Williams for 40 yards on a touchdown in the second play of the game, and there's so much. I mean, we some of this might be overreacting too, but because these Vikings defensive players they drafted are injured, and then you see Jameson Williams come back and boom, like throws it in your face on the second play of the game. But I do remember this show. I think all 3 of us were in lockstep. By the time we got to about 3 weeks before the draft, we were saying they should draft a receiver in the first round. They should. Oh, what are you talking about? They have Thielen and KJ Osborne. I know, but Thielen's like 50, and KJ Osborne is, he's just kind of a guy. What if they drafted an explosive receiver, and now you're looking at yesterday saying, boy, it would have been nice to have an explosive receiver. Now, again, defense was the bigger problem, but the offense, keep in mind, well, maybe this is a good segue into the pie chart here, but one more thought, and we get to the pie chart. The offense yesterday had 7 total points until the 2-minute mark of the third quarter. Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
So just because you racked up a bunch of yards and points trying to play catch up when the Lions got to 31, 34 points, only having 7 until almost the end of the third quarter, that's a problem too. So we're gonna a lot of defensive ripping here, but let's keep in mind the offense has spurts of 60 minutes of real time where they do nothing. So All right, those are your hottest takes. Good stuff. Wow, that might have been our most feisty trio of hottest Vikings takes on the season there. Straight fire from different directions.
It wasn't hard, really.
Amazing. You know what else is straight fire? Prize Picks. It's an easy way to play daily fantasy, and if you pick the over yesterday on almost anything Vikings related, you're in business. Like, Justin, look at this. What's this ticket from?
This is a nice Ty. Ty sent me this yesterday. Look at this little 4-item parlay for $250. I like it.
A little over on more on Kirk, more on Thielen, more on DeAndre Swift, more on Justin Jefferson. Yeah, that's how you do it on Prize Picks. You pick between 2 and 5 players and an over-under on their projections. You can win up to 10 times on any entry. Show us your slips. Use the promo code NORTH, and Prize Picks will match your first deposit up to $100. And by putting in that promo code, you can tell them that we sent you, and you help us, sort of by association. PrizePicks.com or the Prize Picks app. Daily fantasy made easy. Date night made easy thanks to Chanhassen Dinner Theaters, Judd.
That's right. And if you want to be a hero, so if you want to be the guy, the stocking stuffer, your mom, your girlfriend, your wife, I've got the ticket for you right here. In fact, the ticket is one of these gift cards, as Phil just said, to the Chanhassen Dinner Theaters. A gift card is the perfect gift idea for date night. It lets you pick what you want to see, and there's something for everyone. I'll quickly go through it. A splashy musical on stage, Footloose, The Prom, Jersey Boys, a concert series that features tribute concerts, everyone from the Eagles to Patsy Cline. The comedy improv show with Stevie Ray's is a blast as well. And on that date night, you are going to get a great meal, steak, prime rib, the famous Chicken Chan. And it's this simple. Go to chanhassendt.com or call them 952-934-1525 or stop in. But again, chanhassendt.com. And if you do it, make sure that you say that your friends from Score North gave you the suggestion, because it, of course, helps us for them to know that we are making a difference when it comes to ideas for holiday gifts. chanhassendt.com for Chanhassen Dinner Theaters.
All right. I'm going to bust out the knife here, boys.
Nice. Now on Mackey and Judd.
This chart makes it as clear as I can to you.
The pie chart of blame.
You want to blame somebody?
The Rock knows how you feel about pie.
5 slices. 5 slices of pie to go around here.
Manageable.
I think there's a case to be made that there should be more, but I just tried to focus on the main collaborators here in that loss yesterday. Okay. We'll start with the smaller slices and work our way up. And we're actually going to start on the offensive side of the ball here with some small slices. Again, a lot of defensive conversation, but let's not forget that the Vikings had 7 points offensively until the 2-minute mark of the third quarter against the worst defense in the NFL. That is a problem. So 10% goes to the makeshift Vikings offensive line. Some of this is just like happenstance. 40% of your starting offensive line is out, including maybe the best left tackle in the NFL. It's going to be tougher for you, but guys, 17 runs, 22 yards, and a long of 5. Really? Against the worst defense in the NFL?
Yeah.
And you can't get a 6-yard run? A 7-yard run at all? All right, guys, you have 3 hours to get a 6-yard run. Go ahead. And we're going to give you 17 chances. You can't do it.
Yep.
So
that
was a huge reason why they were one-dimensional, why some of these drives just stalled out. You know, again, some of it's injury when you're missing. Bradbury's a very good run blocker. Mm-hmm. Darisaw is a road grader. But then some of it's play calling. Like, why are you going for it? I'm okay going for it on 4th and 1 from midfield range. And I think we have to live with there's going to be a certain percentage of those that just fail. If you want your team to be aggressive and go for it on 4th down, you can't pick and choose. Like, oh, but not this time. But then why are you running it into the back of a backup center? That's my question. Just super weird. So the makeshift offensive line was a huge problem in a lot of ways yesterday. They get 10%.
Very fair.
Okay. If you guys have any further comments, feel free to jump in.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I'm waiting.
10% to the tag team of Kevin O'Connell and Dalvin Cook for the train wreck jump pass play. So that play specifically, I'm giving 10% that Dalvin and KOC can split. So KOC for calling it, part of your goal is to run. In that moment, they were trying to milk clock. They had the ball with like 6.5 minutes left, or maybe even more, and they had this methodical drive going into halftime. And there's at that time there's like 1.5 minutes left. It's a 1st and goal from the 3-yard line. So in a perfect world, you don't necessarily want to score there. You'd like to maybe you run the ball and you get to the 1 or something. Perfect world. I'm not saying you would turn down a touchdown. But if you could run the ball, milk 40 more seconds, make sure that they're going to get basically no time left, if you could do it perfectly. Which is puzzling why they would call basically a trick play that can result in only an incomplete pass or a touchdown or disaster, which is the third
or
option,
worse.
Right? So
Option
it's
3.
I guess I would rather just run it and that was what I was thinking in my head is you should just hand the ball off here. If you score, awesome. If you don't, now you run 40 more seconds off the clock and you try again on 2nd down. But to call that play is essentially guaranteeing the Lions get time back or disaster. And it wound up being disaster. On the Dalvin side, I think people are exonerating him a little bit. Dude, you're a veteran in the NFL here. And I get that that's not the play that you're accustomed to running, which is why we're blaming KOC too. But why was he so confused as to what to do? They obviously practiced that play throughout the week or the season. And as soon as he got the ball, it was like, ooh, slow motion mode. He's kind of fumbling with the ball down by his knees. And then he gets stripped of it. It's like, why was there so much confusion from a veteran on what to do in that spot?
It was like he was expecting a look that he didn't get. Like something clearly went wrong. I think it was probably just the interior pressure. But again, your center was the backup. And so like to run that play, I hated the entire thing. I absolutely hated the entire thing. Where I will absolve Cook a bit is having him run that play to me is pressing your luck. It really is. Again, he's not throwing a pass. This is not like a Cook play that we saw 3 years ago, and now it's like, oh, it's back. So I felt O'Connell more than Cook. But here's what's really weird. So Cook clearly freaked out. Like it's very clear that as he like looks around and you can see he's like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this.
Super weird. Yeah.
All he has to do is fall down, abort the play. Clock ticks. You get touched. Clock keeps going. So like that's where I will fault Cook is, dude, if you're not comfortable with it, that's good. That's cool. I get that. But give yourself up, because if he had just given himself up in that case, it actually would have worked.
Yeah.
Because you still could have scored and the clock keeps going.
According to ESPN's FPI, when the Vikings were in that basically 1st and goal situation, they were at a 53% chance to win the game. So like they were still in control of winning the game. It was coin flippy, but they still had a 53% chance. After the play, and Detroit takes over the football, it now swings to 70% for the Lions to win the game. So that's a 25% chance that just swung completely the other way after a buffooner. Like if it was a handoff and Cook just straight up fumbled, yeah, that stinks. But it was the way that it was executed, and it was a halfback pass to a backup tight end. That's what I think infuriates me.
Yeah, Johnny.
It was a disaster. It was and you guys know I am the president of the Johnny Munt fan club, and I was like when I heard KOC fess up and say, yeah, that was supposed to be a pass to Johnny Munt, I almost spit out my drink.
I do like that he owned it. He wanted to make it clear that it was a play that I called, just so you guys know.
Yes. And we practiced a lot. That's what
they would have tied the game at 14 and then get the ball back in the 3rd quarter, and then instead you're down 7 and then you whiff on your first drive in the 3rd quarter like you always do. I believe I saw yesterday that the Vikings have not scored a touchdown on their opening 3rd quarter drive all season, which matches the memory test, right? Just feels like they don't.
They don't come out and score.
And then real quick on those 2 small slices, so the makeshift offensive line, and I'm looking at that 4th and 1 early where they tried to run up the middle, couldn't even get a yard of push, and then the train wreck jump pass play. Those plays, those offensive failures, and then giving the ball right to Detroit. Here, you're on the fringe of field goal range, right, to start the game, basically. Oh, boom, second play, home run pass to Jamison Williams. Crazy momentum shift right away. A sudden change, if you will. And then the train wreck jump pass play, it's like, you might as well just give the Lions 14 points of swing there in the first half. So, all right, 10% to Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. This might be a little unfair because the jury is very much still out on the 2022 draft these people who are calling it a bust, you have to let it play out for 2 or 3 years. However, it must have been difficult yesterday to see your top 4 defensive players that you drafted in the first, 4 or 5 rounds, Lewis Cine, Andrew Booth, Brian Asamoah, and Caleb Evans doing nothing in that game. Only one of them was active because the other 3 were hurt, and injuries happen. I get that. Meanwhile, Jamison Williams, a guy that you could have drafted if you wanted to, or any number of explosive wide receivers or playmakers on the defensive side of the ball, a 41-yard bomb on the second play of the game, and then jumping around the field and high-fiving everyone in the front row.
First catch, too. His first catch.
Yeah.
Second game.
So, again, it's unfair to sit here and say, well, Lewis Cine's a bust. He got hurt. Well, Lewis Cine got beat out by Cam Bynum to start the season. Remember that. He was second on the depth chart the entire offseason. Andrew Booth was banged up, but he was not effective in the time that he did play over the course of 3 games. Brian Asamoah can barely get on the field unless Jordan Hicks. So Jordan Hicks got hurt, and that might be a thing that gets Brian Asamoah on the field. And Caleb Evans was okay in spurts, but injured. So some of this is injury. But if you're Kwesi, looks a little tenuous with Jamison Williams running around.
Yeah, and on Booth, it's concerning because you took a guy who was projected to be a first-round pick, but because of injury problems, fell to the second round. But everyone said, yeah, he's got a lot of things wrong. And guess what? He's hurt again now. And I think he has been hurt since training camp started 3 or 4 times. So that's the other thing too, is at some point in time that he cannot stay on the field. And the last thing on Cine is when you traded back and you bailed on that pick, don't forget Kyle Hamilton, a safety who's with Baltimore now, who's had a great rookie season, was there. So you passed up the best safety to get cute and to go backwards.
Yep. So we'll see. He'll get a chance to throw it back in everyone's faces in 2 years if some of these guys are studs. But right now it looks rough. 20%, my fourth slice of pie. 20% to the defensive leaders, the players, the defensive leaders of this team. Danielle Hunter, Zadarius Smith, Patrick Peterson, Eric Kendricks, Jordan Hicks. Harrison Smith didn't play yesterday, but he's been a huge part of the defense this season, right? Harrison Phillips and Dalvin Tomlinson. That is, 8 veteran players who've been in the league, starting players for 5-10 years, all of them. If we're going to rip Kirk Cousins for the last several years, well, just because Mike Zimmer is your coach doesn't mean you can't take a leadership role here. You got Zimmer and Kubiak putting their thumb on you. Dude, be a leader. Express what you want. If you think that the offense isn't aggressive enough, if you feel like things need to be changed or added, go have that big boy conversation. Well, if you're one of these defensive leaders, there's 8 of them, for God's sakes. Is there no sort of come to Jesus meeting at any point? They're just going to run the scheme, I guess, and get drubbed every game. So, and some of it too is regardless of the scheme. Why are you guys, as good veteran players, just getting drubbed for 400 plus yards? Why are you missing tackles? Why are there blown coverages? Miscommunication, right? Why, if you're Danielle Hunter, for instance, or Zadarius Smith recently, you can't get pressure in any scheme? You're not dropping into coverage on every play. Go get pressure. So some of this has to fall on the players as we sit here and also rip the chef that's trying to cook up the scheme.
Right. Well, yes, they could easily and should go and say, this doesn't work. Because you can always tweak things. There's this whole thing about, well, it's too late to change. Yes, it's too late to overhaul the defense. But it's not too late to tweak things, make changes. You are, right now, you are delivering a defensive performance that is very well going to get you eliminated in the first round, home field, and you are going to win the division, I think. That is not,
They will.
That is not acceptable. You came out and declared Detroit better than the Vikings. Who knows? The Lions could come back.
I didn't mean that they're gonna win their next 4. Oh, the Vikings
don't slow your roll now. Don't slow your roll now. Yeah. Don't slow your roll now. But anyway, yes, I agree completely. Be an active participant, especially right now, because KOC is clearly going to take a long, hard look, possibly for the first time in his coaching tenure at defense. Be a catalyst now in getting changes made that are going to at least stop the tide of 400 plus yard games.
Yeah. Yep. And that brings us to 50% of the pie. and this is the second time I'm putting KOC in the pie chart. Unprecedented. He's getting two parts of two different slices of pie. The Ed Donatel and Kevin O'Connell scheme. I go back to what Declan said. You kind of threw Kevin O'Connell out there as the guy that was the biggest reason for blame here. I love Kevin O'Connell, but any conversation about Ed Donatel also has to include Kevin O'Connell. He is the head coach of this team, okay? So the scheme, and Ed Donatel probably gets to eat like 80% of this pie, and Kevin O'Connell 20%, because ultimately you hired a guy that's been in the league for 30 years, coordinating for a third of that. Yeah. All right, I'm trusting you, guy, in my first year to figure this out, and he can't. So you got these veteran players, Za'Darius, Daniil, Peterson, Kendricks, Harrison, all these guys. Harrison didn't play yesterday, but Harrison was part of the first 400-yard debacles. Are those guys as good as they all were a few years ago? Not necessarily. Are they aging? Yes. Are they washed and cooked? No. Watch them play. How are they collectively this bad? You're telling me that the chess pieces on this chessboard are just like an immediate loss within 5 seconds of you're going to sit down next to your opponent and like, my chess pieces just don't move, apparently. Okay. I don't know how that collection of veteran players is the worst in the NFL, or second worst if you want to go yardage to Detroit, that still has a slight advantage on you as the worst defense in the NFL. And even KOC after the game confirmed, we need to put these guys in better spots to succeed, which is a shot at the scheme more than the players.
Yes.
Ed Donatel's last 6 seasons as a defensive coordinator, 4 of the 6, he's been in the bottom third of the league in terms of yardage. His only good season was last year under Vic Fangio. That would be like coordinating under Mike Zimmer 5 years ago.
Take a bow.
Yeah, I mean, well, Mike Zimmer was the guy. Vic Fangio is the guy. Vic Fangio is the consultant that people hire, not Ed Donatel.
Correct.
So 50% to the scheme, and not just scheme, but teaching of the scheme, because the scheme works. Look at Denver. Look at the Rams a few years ago in 2020. Brandon Staley. That 3-4 scheme, now having a beast like Aaron Donald helps, but the Vikings have some beast players on this defense. I'm not saying it's going to be the number 1 defense in the league. The scheme works if you have decent players, and the Vikings have some decent players. I guess I'm arguing, why isn't it 18th? Why is it 31st? How about 17th? So there's teaching and scheme problems here that go above and beyond the roster or the aging veteran players.
Update. The Vikings have passed Detroit. Congratulations. Total defense, 403.7 yards per game now. Detroit, 403.2.
Yeah. And yards per play.
So we're last.
Yards per play, it is 6.3 Detroit, 6.2 Vikings or something. So,
yeah. And you know what part of this is? I think that's the most frustrating, because you don't get pressure. And like, again, yesterday, we saw really passive pass defense. There's no scheme where like the lead thing is don't be aggressive. Like, that's what's frustrating. Is it's one thing if you're seeing guys get beat, like when Dantzler got beat, okay, he got beat. Like, that's frustrating to watch, but you totally see that. Yeah. But what's the explanation for basically telling your corners, play off guys, soft coverage, and so the next thing you know, it's 3rd and 9 and it's a 10-yard pass. But you're not getting pressure up front. Like, there's no defensive scheme that calls for just be passive. Yeah. And that's what gets me is like the fault also lies in the approach. And the only thing I could think of is, do they not think that their players are good enough to necessarily cover and make rush and coverage work? And so they're trying to basically be as cautious as possible, because it feels like they're playing cautious.
Yeah, they are. And again, I would ask, what's the worst that can happen if you ratchet up the aggressiveness? What is the worst that can happen? You're already giving up boatloads of yards. All right. There is precedent. I was looking this up before the show. Do Super Bowl contenders ever fire coordinators in December? You're so late in the year. Mm-hmm. And there are some examples. The most notable one is the 2012 Baltimore Ravens. Mm-hmm. They won the Super Bowl. In week 14, after a week 14 loss to at the time, the Washington Redskins, they fired their offensive coordinator, Cam Cameron, I believe.
Yes.
And they promoted your guy, Jim Caldwell, to be the offensive coordinator. And that's when a few weeks later they then took off. Joe Flacco had the Joe Flacco run in December, and that was under a new offensive coordinator. So it has happened before successfully. A very tough decision. A team that was destined to make the playoffs, and they said, despite that, we have to make a change here. So I would be shocked if they flat out fired Ed Donatel, but there's got to be some come to Jesus situation this week. Has to be.
Could you quietly try and transition play calling to like Pettine, which I understand for all of you saying Mike Pettine, he was a bust too. He has been at times, but he also has been successful. Mm-hmm. And I think he's more of a natural DC. I think Ed is a position coach who occasionally becomes a DC, but I wonder if you could quietly transition the play calling to Pettine and not announce that. Like, I'm just trying to think of, because I'm with you. Nothing that Kwesi and O'Connell have done so far, Phil, would lead you to believe that they are going to get up to a podium and say, Ed Donatel's been fired.
Yeah. But right? if Ed does a song and dance at the podium publicly on Thursday, at which he gets contentious with the media and blames the players or something, I don't think he's going to, because I think there's going to be a difficult conversation with KOC before that takes place on Thursday. But this will be an interesting dynamic to watch for sure this week. So the pie chart is served in 5 slices: 50% Donatel KOC scheme, 20% defensive players and leaders, 10% Kwesi, 10% Dalvin Cook and KOC for the train wreck jump pass, and 10% to the Vikings' disgusting offensive line yesterday. There you go. All right.
The Rock knows how you feel about pie.
Silver linings coming up here in just a second. One silver lining for you during this holiday season is you don't have to balloon. You can, in fact, lose weight and get a head start on those people. In January, they're going to change their lives.
Exactly right. January 1, Health Club will be packed, and everyone will be like, I'm trying to lose weight now, but why don't you start now? In fact, it is this simple. Brought to you by my friends at Livia Weight Control Center. This holiday season, give yourself that gift of good health. You might be on the couch right now, but imagine that in a month from now, you've dropped 10 pounds, 15 pounds. By the springtime, all those clothes that don't fit, and that is all possible. And get this, there's an added incentive right now. If you sign up, you save 50% savings to give yourself the gift of good health. It's this simple. 855-GO-LIVEA, Livia, LIVEA.com. You can go in person if you're in town here. If you're not, no problem. Virtual meetings are an option for you. Livia, LIVEA.com. Give yourself that gift and start losing the weight today. I dropped 40 pounds, feeling fantastic.
Boom. If you're a business owner out there and you're looking for just a guiding hand to help you navigate the sometimes choppy waters of running a business, Federated Insurance has been providing this for over 100 years to business owners. They measure their success as a company by the success of your business. They're all about risk management, tools and resources, and smart people galore. When you go to federatedinsurance.com, you can find who your local marketing representative would be to partner on this venture. And again, federatedinsurance.com, where it's our business to protect yours. All right, let's go around the room here. Start with Judd. Give me at least one silver lining off of a really disappointing loss yesterday.
Well, I'll start with the obvious one again, because a definite one. Kirk Cousins and Justin Jefferson were a magnificent, magical combo. It's a shame that this statistical performance is going to get lost in the fact that, one, the offense, to Phil's point earlier, didn't produce enough points, and two, the defense just flat out stunk. Cousins, 425 yards and 2 touchdowns. I believe that tied his performance in Green Bay in 2018 when the Vikings tied the Packers. And Jefferson, 11 passes, finally broke that long-standing, since 1976, Sammy White record, 223 yards. I believe Sammy in 1976, November of that year, caught 210 yards worth of passes. But that is a phenomenal day. That is a great day. And you know what I can say? I could say with complete confidence that for one of the first times, Cousins Crusaders, I'm with you. It wasn't Kirk's fault.
Oh, God, no.
Kirk Cousins did everything.
He was outstanding.
Yeah, he did. And he was tough, too. Again, he took a ton of hits. He got blasted, got up, And you know what he didn't do? I didn't think he padded his stats. I thought that he basically kept trying to win the game, which I think that there's a stark difference to you're getting blown out and here's Kirk dinking and dunking. He was making probably what would be considered low percentage throws. Jefferson was making phenomenal catches. That was not stats padding on either of their parts. That was trying to win that football game.
It's tied for the most yards of Kirk Cousins' Vikings career with 425. And like you said, and I made reference on Ventline to garbage time, a little bit of garbage time in there. If I could tweak that, I would say game flow garbage time, meaning like you were down by 10 to 14 points. At one point, it was like 15 points or whatever. And so the game flow dictated that you chunk the ball down the field. So there was some of that in there, but it was all within striking distance. They were trying to score quick, get the ball back. So he did everything he could. He stood in there, like you said, with some backup offensive linemen, and he kept hunting down the field. And when you can devote that high of a percentage of targets to Jefferson and Hockenson, and Thielen is one of their best weapons, even though we ripped him earlier in the show for not being the same as he used to be.
I don't think that's ripping. I think that's just him now.
I know it is. It's not his fault. It's just the
Right.
evolution of being an older football player.
Yep.
But and on a day where there was virtually no running game at all, for him to still be able to stand back there. So no running game, and the game flow dictates that you have to pass. They know you're going to pass, and you have backup offensive linemen to still stand in there and throw for 400 plus yards is pretty incredible. So that's one of the best games Kirk has played, probably as a Viking dating back 5 seasons.
Silver lining for me is feeding your playmakers. So the Vikings had 23 targets to Justin Jefferson and TJ Hockenson yesterday. 23 targets. They ended up grabbing 17 receptions between the two, but Kirk made an effort to get the ball to the top 2 playmakers. That's why you traded for TJ Hockenson. I'm not sure why the Lions were booing TJ Hockenson. It's not like he requested out or was a bad egg during his tenure. At least, I don't know. I'm not recording Lions Daily 7 days a week, so maybe I'm not aware of how things ended with TJ Hockenson.
Oh, Judd and I didn't tell you? Oh, there's been a trade. Sorry, we're actually sending Declan and a couple 4th-round picks to Lions Daily.
WDFN.
Yes.
But I love that they fed the top 2 playmakers here. I mean, Jefferson goes off for 223. I know Hockenson had a really bad ball-breaking drop, basically, that would have been a first down in this game. But these are your best 2 playmakers. Feed them. Feed them. You don't have to do check downs to Johnny Munt. You don't have to do halfback passes to Johnny Munt or C.J. Ham, wherever the hell it is. They actually ended up feeding their top 2 offensive weapons in Jefferson and Hockenson, and I would love to see that for the rest of the season, too.
I think my silver lining is they're still very much in the driver's seat to be the number 2 seed in the NFC. I'd be looking over my shoulder at the Brock Purdy-led San Francisco 49ers now, who just absolutely dehumanized the Buccaneers yesterday in front of Tom Brady's family and friends. That was embarrassing.
They ripped his heart out of his chest and stomped on it.
Mother and the Cowboys eking out a victory to stay within 2 games of the Eagles and to be tied record-wise with the Vikings doesn't matter, because whoever finishes second in that division is going to be the 5 seed. So you're really, at this point, and you're 4 games clear of the Buccaneers, so you're only competing with the division winners.
Right.
It's a race between the Vikings and the Niners for the number 2 seed.
Right.
But even if the Niners catch you, okay, you're the 3 seed, and you're going to play a home playoff game in the first round. Would rather be the 2 seed.
Right.
But yesterday's loss didn't change the landscape of what you're trying to do here much. It just exposed that you maybe are more fraudulent than people would have hoped.
If you don't do something starting today with the defense, I don't care what your seed is, you're going to get bounced fairly quickly. So that's the most important thing. We're about to find out. Kevin O'Connell strikes me as a very nice guy, but I know behind the scenes he is extremely competitive, and I think he can be a jerk. And this week is a time, not to his players, but this week is a time to be a jerk. Winning is more important in that job than anything. And your appreciation for Donatel or your thought process that this would work, because he talked about, I wanted to hire a guy that ran this scheme because I knew from talking to players offensively that this scheme with the Rams gave us fits, right? So I want to practice against it. It's not working though. So I almost don't care what your seed is. I care about, are you willing to make the necessary in-season adjustments? And to quote PJ Fleck, in this case, are you willing to eat a very difficult conversation for breakfast? Because calling Ed in is not going to be a simple conversation.
Yeah.
Like
and
that's going to be very in depth.
And you're talking, this is another one of those weird age dynamics. What's KOC? 38?
37. I think he's still
37.
Yep.
Ed Donatel is 65.
Yep.
And
yeah,
those are not easy dynamics where you're going to go in there and you're going to tell someone who has been an NFL coach almost as long as you've been alive, 31 years, and coaching football for 50 years or whatever. You're going to go in there and you're going to say, here's what I think needs to happen. Ed Donatel's first year as a NFL coach was with the New York Jets in 1990. He was 33 years old, secondary coach. And he was with the Broncos when they won a Super Bowl, back-to-back Super Bowls as a secondary coach in the late 90s. That's kind of how he became a defensive coordinator with the Packers and worked his way up. And so you're going to dig through all that history and ego potentially and say, Ed, what we're doing here is not good enough. So,
yes,
God, I'd love to be a fly on the wall.
Or you could flat out
Oh
say,
my
Ed,
God.
you're not going to like this. I'm not going to fire you, but I am stripping you of play calling.
Yeah.
And that's the end of the conversation.
And like you said, he may quit.
He might quit.
He may quit.
Yeah. Guess what? Too bad. That's the thing about this is the first crisis is too strong a word. This is the first really difficult situation KOC has faced. I mean, things have gone incredibly well.
It's a crisis at this point. I think we can call it a crisis.
But I'm saying this is the first like come to Jesus. You're going to have to do something. You know, besides this, it's been Vikings-wise, smooth sailing.
Mm-hmm.
No pun intended there. I didn't even realize I did that. Vikings-wise, smooth sailing.
Oh, sailing. That's
very funny. Very funny.
Little boat
yeah,
reference.
I didn't even mean to it.
All right, are you done?
But I'm just telling you, today's a tough day. Purple Daily family, today's a tough day. Grab your Surleys, your loved ones, and hang on.
Oh, amazing. All right. Well, we got you guys covered. More therapy as needed here. Tomorrow we will re-rank the top 10 teams in the NFL. And over on Mackie and Judd, our other daily show, which has become largely a Viking show as well this season, we'll give you our statements. I've got a couple more things we didn't even get to on Purple Daily today that will be discussed in statements. So thanks for hanging out with us. And check out Ventline too if you haven't. Please click subscribe on the Purple Daily YouTube channel and the like button to spread the word about this Vikings community. And we'll see you guys tomorrow on Purple Daily.